again, and hopefully his girlfriend does not interrupt the call.
Hey, welcome in. You're going to want to mute the stream in the background. You're live.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Yeah, I just muted it.
No problem, man. Welcome on the show. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for hosting the show and giving everybody, I guess, a chance to debate these topics right now. And your topics aren't really too controversial, I guess, at the moment as well. So I think that's really good. You know, these are more fundamental issues, I think, that are kind of going on with the system. That until they're ironed out, I don't think any progress will be made.
I tend to agree with you, and that's why it's hard for me to understand the opposition to it besides just party over country, right? I mean, I think most people, even conservatives at a fundamental level, because when I was a conservative, I wouldn't have agreed with, you know, we're going to tax people but not let them have any representation. But now that it's, you know, they might not vote our way, you have to get back to the fundamentals of what makes America a democratic country that we all want to participate in, you know. And like I said, you're just not going to vote the way I want. It's hard for me to support that kind of position.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the one thing, though, recently that I could see would be worth filibustering, I guess, was the spending for the COVID relief. You know, I forget what the first couple were, but I think the last one was $1.9 trillion, which was in the guise of infrastructure improvement, which only about 350 billion of 1.9 trillion was going to actually go toward COVID relief directly, or infrastructure. I'm sorry. The rest of it seemed like was going to get taken in some way or another by people in political power, whether it be, you know, Nancy Pelosi's husband getting awarded a contract, or you know, the Clinton Foundation, I guess, saying they're going to give relief to Haiti. You know, these are just things I've heard of in the past, and I guess I'd like to see more of that money go to the people. And unless we have people in Washington who represent us opposing things that are not in the best interest of Americans, we're going to be taken advantage of, and our tax dollars are just going to go to issues that don't need it.
I don't necessarily agree or disagree with you. I do agree that we need people in Washington that represent, you know, or are trying their best to represent, you know, the interest of average Americans and the majority of Americans around the country. I don't think you're ever going to get, for the most part, unanimous consent across the country on any bill. I don't think it really matters what it is. There's always going to be somebody somewhere inside the United States that disagrees on the specifics of one particular bill. If the representatives that are elected to represent their districts, you know, go up there and vote for a bill, and the citizens of that state don't like it, they can vote them out. If the opposition party wants to say, hey, this bill is bullshit and this is why, and they want to, you know, advertise on that and run against that candidate on that, I'm fine with all of that. What I'm not okay with is just shutting down any legislation entirely because it's the other team. Like we saw under Obama with McConnell, right? Like any judicial appointment, it didn't matter what federal court it was to. We're not even talking the Supreme Court, right? All of them. We're just going to block all of them. I mean, you're just shutting down government functioning at that point.
Right, and any delay in progression for our democratic system is divisive for anybody. And like you say, I mean, I think you know, liberals could come out and say, we want to improve everybody's life quality by making sure everybody has a job and their kids have college, you know, and kind of this socialist agenda.
Yeah.
We want to create a perfect utopia. You know, of course people are going to oppose it because there's always that underlying question of, well, how are we going to afford it? And that's kind of the problem, you know, is that we have so much that we want to accomplish on both sides of the aisle. But until we're able to come together on these types of issues with the hard questions of how are we going to afford this stuff? Who's going to pay for it? Is it going to be fair to everyone? You know, I mean, myself personally, I make a decent amount of money, and it's very middle class, decent money. Yeah. But, you know, we're taxed more than anyone. And I don't personally see any of the benefits of these tax funds.
I'm sure you see some benefits of it. I mean, you have roads and highways and internet infrastructure and that sort of stuff.
Right, but not fairly. You know what I'm saying?
Well, my argument, and the vast majority of the progressive left and the socialist wing, right, would be that we just need to go back to taxing the super wealthy like we did under Eisenhower. I mean, the effective tax rate on the super wealthy in this country used to be like 93%.
Yeah, so then you've got the super wealthy taking all of their business out of the country, which then what do you do about that?
You can tax imports if it comes to it, or you can do an exit tax with the money leaving the country.
Right. So, like, specifically right now, I went to IKEA yesterday with the family. It's the first time I'd ever walked into an IKEA.
I still haven't been. Don't tell anybody.
Oh my gosh, it is it's a catastrophe. We have this huge company here in the United States selling goods from other countries around the entire world. How does that benefit us?
So the argument for how it benefits us is cheaper goods, right? And it provides employment, and you get the taxes off the sales, and you get the taxes off the income and all that sort of stuff. But more importantly, it provides the answer to your question of, well, if we tax the wealthy, they're just going to take all their money and run, right? We'll just take Amazon as an example. They could corporate headquarters somewhere else, but if you don't have any distribution, warehouses, et cetera, drivers, anything in this country, you're missing a huge market. Somebody's going to step in and fill it. And then we can tax whoever steps in and fills it, right? And this is the same thing we used to do back in the 50s. If you benefit... I'm kind of with Teddy Roosevelt on this. Those who benefit the most from American society should provide the most to help continue its existence. If American society sees fit to make me a billionaire, if I benefit from it, that I have no problem footing the highest bill to help support it.
Absolutely. So that kind of brings in like Trump's taxes into question, right? He paid $750 on God knows how many billions he made on his taxes, just in a year. But then you've also got the other end of the spectrum, like, okay, this guy who's got a lot of money can stimulate the economy by giving a lot of money. However, that guy who employs thousands of people is also stimulating the economy by giving people jobs. I don't want to get into a religious battle here, and I'm not really religious by any means, but, Jesus taught a man to fish instead of giving him fish, you know what I mean?
Jesus also said, render unto Caesar. Jesus also said, render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's. So Jesus didn't have a problem with paying taxes back in the day either. I might, in the next couple of episodes, do a bit on trickle-down economics, which is basically supply-side economics that you were just arguing for, that if you give the wealthy, basically no taxes, then it'll filter on out. The short version is, economically speaking, we know it doesn't work. I don't have the information to provide you that with right now. I can point you to different graphs, like if you'll go Google search it, or you can wait for the next couple of shows, where the economy, if you control for time, you can pick like 2 years before the presidential office change, or the day the presidential office has changed, or whatever the case is. It consistently grows higher and faster under not supply side economics, not Reagan theory, not Bush theory, not those kind of tax cuts. It doesn't work.
Right, and I'm not saying that the top 2% of Americans who own businesses, or anybody, whether they're American or not, I suppose, that owns businesses here in the United States, don't pay taxes. That's not at all what I would advocate for.
That's what we've got right now, unfortunately, though.
So you're saying we have right now where the top 2% are the only ones that pay taxes? They don't pay taxes.
They don't. I mean, Jeff Bezos, you know, the owner of Amazon, has paid less in taxes over the last several years than you or I probably have. Between various loopholes and write-offs and everything else. Yeah, it's just absolutely insane.
Right. I mean, I'm a welder, so I'm by no means a political scientist or anything here. I do a lot of my own research, and a lot of it is, like you say, from the talking heads that we hear through whatever form of the media it is. But I feel like everyone should pay 10% across the board, whether you're a big time, huge mega billionaire or you're the lowest of the low. You know, 10%, that's giving your fair share, whatever that is you made. And these government welfare programs that we have currently, you know, I think they should also treat everyone the same. You know, I mean, unless you have, I guess, some form of disability that hinders you from being able to have a job, I don't think you should be allowed to stay on this welfare system. You know, I don't get how, you know, somebody that doesn't pay anything to the system reaps the most reward. You know, everybody can have a job. I mean, if you're putting stamps on envelopes, you know, I mean, you're still doing something. You know, I mean, we've got people on the left here, the Dirty Truth guy on Twitter. You know, he makes all kinds of memes and stuff like that, and he's literally paralyzed.
Let me pause you for a second, because you jumped on, you hit two things, and I don't want to lose them. So can I pause you for a second? Okay. Yeah, totally. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure. Like I said, I'm trying to be fair. The 10% across the board. Okay, I used to agree with that position. I'm going to tell you what changed my mind, and I don't expect it to change your mind live on air, but I would encourage you to go look into it. The short version is, the less money you make, the more of your income goes towards things that are absolutely necessary, right? So if I make $1,500 a month, by the time you take basic housing, basic food, basic, you know, transportation, whether that's Uber or whether that's a cheap little cash car, basic car insurance, right? I don't have very much left over at all, right? So that 10% of my $1,500 is a whole lot more of my discretionary income than it is of the guy that's making $1 billion a year, or, you know, several $100 million a year, right? So that's the reason that most taxes in most countries are graduated, meaning they get higher as you go higher. Your first $1,500 a month, we're only going to tax at, 5%. Your next $1,500, we're going to tax at 10%, because we're trying to let people get the basics covered, right? And then as we're trying to go after what's more discretionary, so it doesn't impact your way of life. If you made $1 million a month, right, and I taxed you at 10% just across the board, that's fine. Now let's pretend you started making $2 million a month, and I took 50% of that next $2 million. So you only netted $500,000, but your first $1 million was still taxed at 10%. I haven't really impacted your lifestyle in any way, have I?
No, not significantly at all.
And that's the argument for progressive taxation.
Right, but my argument with that is what incentive do I have to make more when I'm just going to get taxed more on it?
Because you're still making more, right? So even to make it absurd, right? Let's say your first $1 million was only taxed at 10%, and then your second $1 million was taxed at 50%. You're still making an extra $500,000 as compared to, nothing more. And you can take the same argument and point it to zero taxation, right? What the hell does Jeff Bezos need to keep making millions of dollars for? He's got more than he could ever spend in multiple lifetimes. Where's the motivation?
Right. But with that money, and I'm not a fan of Amazon at all, but what he does with his money is his business.
Thank you for the follow.
I think there should be some form of red tape set up for monopolies, but when
there is, we just don't
guys,
enforce it. You and I agree there. There is red tape set up for monopolies. We just don't enforce it anymore. And I'm hugely back to getting in favor of that. I think the companies and monopolies have gotten way too big.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you go back to the COVID stuff, and you had all these companies that were allowed to stay open, and they only got richer, while these small businesses, these mom and pop shops were forced to shut down. Bezos came out with Amazon and said, oh, well, we actually do support small business. If you want to support small business, you go on our website, you buy their product. But how much of a cut is Bezos getting from those small businesses now?
So why don't we just tax Bezos and use it to subsidize small businesses at that point? Because you've already, like I said, you agree with me that we're not making a substantive, impact on his life when we start taxing the super wealthy at higher percentages.
I don't understand what you're saying there. So you're saying don't tax the super wealthy at higher percentages?
No, why wouldn't we?
He's not making a substantial amount.
We should tax the super wealthy at higher percentages, and then we can use that money to subsidize to help out the smaller businesses and help them, get back to where they were pre-pandemic levels.
Yeah, I agree with that totally. I mean,
okay.
I don't think that forcing them to move their businesses out of the country, however, would be in our best interest. Like I said, I mean, taxing the super wealthy would be great, ideally if they didn't move their businesses out of the country. When you look at like the Amazon headquarters, like in Denver, I mean, I don't know off the top of my head how many people it employs, but I personally welded the gas line going to the building, and it's a huge building. So I can only imagine that it employs probably thousands of people.
I agree with you, but this goes back to what I was saying earlier about, okay, if Amazon chose to leave the United States because, they didn't want to pay taxes, right? That market is still there. It's not like Amazon could build that distribution facility that you welded on in, England and serve the United States, the region of the country where you live, right? It has to be there to serve that market. There's not a way around it.
Right. Yeah. So without the increase in taxes for the mega billionaires, it's not going to be fair across the board. Like you said, I mean, it impacts someone like us a lot more than obviously a mega billionaire. So then why wouldn't you put some kind of moratorium on products coming from China that uses slave labor and obviously is on nowhere near the same scale as what we're able to produce here in the United States?
I tend to agree with you on that. I don't think that blocking products is the way to do it. You can tax the products in this country, or you can tax the profits or revenues made in this country by them selling those products here. I think it's too late to turn back the clock and go back to like a manufacturing economy. I think that ship has sailed, unfortunately. I would have been in favor of slowing it down back then, but obviously that didn't happen, right? I don't think that you can just cut the spigot anymore. But what I do think you can do is, okay, that Chinese company, to use your example, right, that's selling all those products over here. Those products are being sold here. We can tax the profits they're making and use it to subsidize the United States economy. And then you've got the advantage of, less expensive goods to the consumer, right? But you're still getting the tax money to provide the services to American citizens that you need to provide, whether that's, new job training, or whether that's, some kind of universal basic income, or wherever you want to go with that direction. You've got money to go at that point. You're not losing the entire tax base.
So there actually are a lot of small businesses that are coming out of the woodworks now, and they're like, hey, we're a conservative supporting company, and we've got these products. And a lot of people on my side of the aisle are supporting them, like Mike Lindell, or like a lot of these little businesses. The one specifically, I'm not trying to give them shout outs or anything, but there was one in Canada. Yeah, it's the Rock Shop or whatever, the Tea Rock Shop or something. And basically they said, if you got the vaccine recently, we don't want you in our store. obviously they were more on the conservative side of the aisle, and their business is booming because of it.
Well, and you hit the nail on the head right
taxes,
there. So that's just
right.
capitalism being capitalism. It's the same reason you see woke corporations right now, right? With like cancel culture being a thing, right? It's the same shit. Okay. Your conservative small business, right? Or Mike Lindell, who I would argue that's the MyPillow guy for people who don't know. I would argue he's not a small business anymore. I mean, he's been selling on Fox for years, and he's multimillionaire at this point, right? They're doing it because it sells. It benefits their business. If it quit benefiting their business, they would quit doing it. The same is true for the woke corporations. You're just seeing both sides of this right now. That's all it is.
Right. So did the wokeism help Coke, or did it help the professional football or baseball or hockey? I don't think it did.
Obviously they thought it did, because I could ask the same questions about, Mike Lindell, right? Is him being so blatantly pro-Trump, the election was a fraud. Is that helping him sell pillows? Because I'm not going to buy a pillow from him, right? But obviously somebody in his company and him himself think that it is, and that's why they're making that decision. It's the same, like I said, you're seeing the same phenomenon from both sides.
Right. So then would you tax the goods coming from, since you say we're not what did you call it? Like an industrial, we're not creating things so much in this country.
Yeah, we're not a manufacturing economy.
Goods coming into Right. Manufacturing economy. So then would you tax those goods coming into the country enough to discourage people from purchasing goods from overseas as opposed to goods manufactured here in our country? Or would it be just enough to basically hurt the consumer, the American consumer?
I would be more interested in taxing the profits, put it that way.
Right. So
I wouldn't care to distinguish between here and elsewhere, but I'm open to that argument, right? I just have to need to see more evidence on it, because obviously with the last two shows, I'm not prepared to do like a full economic debate right now. But that my gut impulse would be, let's tax the profits, whatever it is, right?
So that's my position on DC becoming the 51st state, as well as any of our other territories, as well as the filibuster. It just seems like another way for the left to move the goalposts to achieve what they want. I understand it gets rid of some of the arbitrariness, obviously using our tax dollars to debate how to cook oysters or salad dressing is very arbitrary. But, when it comes down to things like the COVID relief funds, or what's another recent topic they've had, police reform or whatever, you're not going to want to hold those topics up in litigation forever. You're going to want to actually see something get done by it.
Correct. I do want to see something get done. Yeah. I don't disagree with that.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
Even if so what you're doing is what's called an argument from consequences fallacy. It's basically saying, I can't address this point because I don't like the results that would come from it. And it doesn't address the central point of the actual question. So should the citizens in DC have representation? You can't just argue, I don't like the way they'll vote, because that's fallacy and it doesn't help your case at all, right? You're back to the more fundamental question of, do the citizens who are paying taxes, federal taxes in DC, deserve representation in Congress? And I think you and I agree there that they do.
Yeah, I think any taxpaying American should have representation.
Okay. Then from that position, I don't see how you can get to, I don't want them to be the 51st state, without saying it's because I don't like the way that those American citizens are going to vote.
Yeah, I don't particularly think that they would only vote exclusively liberal. I don't think that would be the case at all. I think they have their own opinions, and they're entitled to them as any American does.
Yeah, however, I would tend to agree with you.
At that point,
but they are.
At that point, would DC remain the sole power of the United States, because then at that point, you know, you've got so many people there that have so much power and money. Then you're kind of, and this is just kind of the argument that I've heard, is that, I mean, I think I even heard like Bongino or something say something about it, like how they would basically have too much power, you know, over the government at that point if they became the 51st state. And I don't understand exactly what he meant by that.
So I haven't seen that clip exactly. So the short version is, if DC became the 51st state, they would have 2 senators, because they're a state, right? Same as, like, you know, Vermont and Wyoming, who they have more people than, and they would have 2 senators, just like Alaska, right? Who they're equivalent to. They would have 1 representative who could vote in the House of Representatives, because they'd still be a small state, right? I don't see how that gives them too much power, unless you're trying to, and this is without seeing it for everybody else, right? Unless you're trying to, like, hint that the congressmen would become residents of DC, but that's not what would happen, because the congressmen would have to be, you know, residents of whatever state they came from. We're talking about the people that live and work in DC, not the government people who move there, you know? So I'm not sure exactly what he'd be referring to either.
Right. So are there actually, I mean, I've been to DC a couple of years ago. I went, and it didn't seem like a whole lot of people really lived there. You know, even I
720,000
traveled down. Huh.
Yeah.
And what kind of, I mean, what's the demographic of those people? Do you know? I mean, do they work there just picking up trash and doing the basic fundamentals of a society, or is it?
So the income demographic, the income demographic, I would have to infer. I would assume that it's higher than average, because I do know for a fact that DC citizens pay a higher federal tax per person than any other state in the country, right? So not only do they have no representation, but on average, those 700,000 Americans are paying more in federal tax than you or I are, or anybody in our state is, right? I also know that DC as a district, demographically is more African American than most other states. So I would be the first state, I think, that would be majority African American, but I may be mistaken on that. But yeah, it's 700,000 Americans, which is more than Wyoming and Vermont, and then it's equivalent to Alaska. So I mean, it's substantial enough to be a state in terms of population.
So do they have a local government in DC,
yes.
like a local police force that's dedicated to, so it's actually a district, right? It's not actually a state.
It's a city currently defined as a district. The problem is the district can't self-govern. Congress can step in and override anything they want to do.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. And even then, they would be paying federal taxes. So it would be like if the state of Colorado, right? Okay, yeah, you're a state and you could pay your Colorado taxes, but we're also going to charge you federal taxes, and you don't get to vote for president, you don't get to vote for senator, you don't get to vote for your House representative. That would be the equivalent here. And I don't know most states that would be okay with that.
Right, that doesn't seem fair.
No, it's not.
No, not at all. I mean, it doesn't seem fair.
Yeah. And that's why I said, in my opinion, they should have representation in Congress. They have 1 member of Congress right now currently, but that person cannot vote. They can sit on the committee and voice their opinion, but they can't vote. So it's the same as, like, you know, back in 1776 when we could write, you know, letters to the king and to Parliament, but they didn't have to listen to anything anybody over here said because we couldn't vote, right? It's the same argument.
Yeah, I suppose I would support them becoming a 51st state then, in order to give those citizens of the United States a voice, under the condition that there were no underhanded deals being made by senators and congressmen and women, or the president for that matter, with the local representatives of DC.
What kind of underhanded deals? Can you just give me like one example of what you'd be talking about?
So, especially with the COVID funding stuff, a lot of people have benefited from them directly as a consequence of being someone knowing or related to some of the representatives who voted in favor of the relief funds.
Oh, okay. So you're saying you wouldn't want like the DC senators being bought off if they became senators.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's already law for any state. So I don't think you would need to have to do it for DC specifically. I think we both need? It
feels like it's so easy.
I agree. I think I think both parties hugely need to start enforcing anti-corruption measures. You and I are on agreement there. You'll get no argument for me, and we need to bust against corruption.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right, brother. You got anything else for me?
Not really pertaining to this topic particularly. I'll keep doing my homework on it, and hopefully I could bring some better commentary next time.
Oh, no, for sure. Oh, absolutely, man. I appreciate you being on, and that's why last week is always open for discussion, right? So next week, if you could find something on the filibuster that I haven't seen, yeah, by all means bring it up, because I would rather be right at the end of the day than I would win at the end of the day.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, man. Well, thank you for your call. You're welcome back anytime, and I appreciate you watching.
Thanks, Chris. Have a good one.
You too. Everybody, that was Cbergeron from the great state of Colorado, conservative. I think this is his second episode being in. That was his first call in. Very productive call, and it was greatly appreciated. If anybody else would like to call in, the number is toll-free down there, 855-915-5338, 815-915-LEFT. We're going to take about another 5-minute break. If we don't have a caller after that, we're going to wrap up the show. So we'll check back right after that. And yes, I agree. After Shark and Dash Mickey, that was a very good call and a great discussion. I greatly enjoyed it. Cbergeron, for your knowledge, I do think I'm going to do something on trickle-down economics and supply-side theory, cutting the taxes on the super wealthy, and that will be thanks to you. So probably not next week, but coming up soon, because you raised a very good question and point there, and I want to get to it. Anyway, everybody, we will be back after the break, and we'll see whether we have any calls on after that or not. Rack0716, why can't all conservatives on Twitch be like that? It's not just conservatives. It is more vocal on the conservative side right now, but it's not just conservatives. You'll see the same stuff out of people on the far, far, far left, like the Marxist-Leninists, that want to just run over anybody without any evidence. You can find people on the conservative side that are far right that will agree or that will engage with evidence and have civil discussions, just like you can on the far left. But you can also find extremes on both sides that just want to scream and holler and pretend that they're right and throw a temper tantrum. So that's why I said I don't care where anybody is, as long as they're willing to have a civil, honest discussion and engage with evidence, I'm willing to have a conversation with them. And we all need to be able to do that.